A 28-year-old Syrian woman has just arrived at the emergency department. Mrs. X presents with complaints of 8 out of 10 abdominal pain, nausea, and vomiting. Mrs. X has only been in Canada for a short time, so she knows very little English. This makes it difficult for the healthcare team to assess her and provide adequate care, since a translator was unavailable. The nurse uses a translator app on an iPad to gather information about Mrs. X. The nurse learns that Mrs. X lives in an apartment with her 8-month-old son and another refugee family. Mrs. X finds it very overwhelming being in a new country on her own. The nurse passes the iPad along to radiography so they too could benefit. They used the translation app prior to the procedure to explain to Mrs. X what to expect. After conducting an assessment and receiving the diagnostic test results, the healthcare team diagnoses Mrs. X with appendicitis requiring an emergency appendectomy. Mrs. X expresses her concerns about surgery and how she will take care of her son after discharge. The nurse validates these concerns and provides education to prepare Mrs. X. After surgery, a male nurse is assigned to Mrs. X. Mrs. X avoids eye contact and is visibly distressed when the male nurse tries to assess her. The male nurse is confused. The nurse calls the interpreter, who is luckily available at this time to come speak with the patient. With the help of the interpreter, the nurse learns that in her culture, Mrs. X highly prefers a healthcare professional of the same sex. Mrs. X explains that it is considered disrespectful for a man to be touching her that is not her husband. The male nurse asks a female colleague to trade assignments to honor Mrs. X's cultural preference. Mrs. X expresses her gratitude to the staff for being culturally considerate.